You're going to use your understanding of namespaces, Gradle, and compatibility to make one final adjustment, which will optimize our app size on older platforms. If you've looked closely at our dice images, you've probably noticed that they're all XML files. As explained before, these XML files are vectors. If you look at them, they define vector colors and shapes, and they're called vector drawables. The nice thing about vector drawables is that they can scale without losing quality, which is why we chose them. An important thing to know about vector drawables, though, is that they're supported in API version 21 and onwards. But you might have noticed that our minimum SDK version is actually set to API level 19. Now, as you've seen many times by now, your app works and it seems to work just fine. So what's actually going on? Well, what Gradle is currently doing is that when it builds your app, part of the build process is to actually generate a bunch of PNG files that are used on any of those devices that are below API level 21. And it uses these PNG files instead of the included vector drawable graphics. Now, these extra PNG files are going to make the size of your app larger. Unnecessarily large apps are not great for a number of reasons. They make downloads slower for users, which can waste their data plan, and they take up more of their device's limited space. The numbers show that larger applications also have a higher chance of being uninstalled and of users failing or canceling downloads of those applications. The good news is that there's an Android X compatibility library for vector drawables all the way back to API level 7. To use this library, you're going to need to do three things. First, you need to add Android X vector support to your build.gradle file. Then, you're going to need to add a new namespace to your layout. Finally, you're going to need to change your image use from using source to using source compat. Okay, so to start, you're going to go to your app's build.gradle file. And then here in the default config block, I'm going to add one more line of code, which says vector drawables dot use support library equals true. Now every time that you modify a Gradle file, you're going to see this sync now message appear, and you should press it. This ensures that whatever changes that we just made here are reflected in the project. Alright, so that was step one, so next I'm going to close this, and I'm going to go over to my layout file, which is activity_main. Now I want to add a new namespace up here, so I'm going to go below this namespace, and just copy and paste this app namespace. The Android namespace that we can see defined up here is a namespace for all the attributes that come as part of the core Android framework. And we can see that Android namespace used all over our XML file. Meanwhile, this app namespace here is a namespace for attributes that come either from your custom code or libraries, and not from the core Android framework. Now, once you've added this new app namespace, you can actually use it. If we look at what this is complaining about down here, it actually says that you can now use vector drawable compat, and that you need to use the app source compat attribute. So I'm going to go ahead and change that. Namespace app, and we're using source compat now. What source compat does is it's using the Android X library to support vector drawable in older versions of Android, all the way back to API level 7. Those were our three steps, so let's go ahead and compile and run, just make sure that everything's working. And it looks like it is. Cool. So now you know the proper way to use vector drawables while also keeping compatibility with older versions of Android. And this is how you will use vector drawables throughout the rest of this course.